Welcome. My name is Adrian Hammond, and I'll be your moderator for tonight. Please stand in prayers by Reverend Shaw and remain standing for the pledge of allegiance.
Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. Thank you for your goodness, your mercy. Lord, we thank you that you are God, you are life. We ask for your protection, we ask for your wisdom. As we go through this meeting this afternoon, Father, that you empower us with wisdom from on high. We'll be able to answer the question, be able to, Lord, ask the question. And Lord, we thank you that you lead to guide us, and we thank you that you chose us for this time. And we ask your blessing on this meeting. In Jesus' name.
Amen. The flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Let's go ahead and ask you questions. Go ahead. Okay.
Before we present our members, I would like to let you know what We the People Committee is about. The We the People Committee was formed to enlighten the people of our parish and neighboring parishes about the CO2 projects that are going on in our area and surrounding parishes, and how these projects may affect you, your health, your family, your politicians or political agendas or political parties, but to come together, share and gain knowledge, and propose a solution on how we move forward. As I introduce the We the People Committee, would each of the committee members stand, make yourself known, and stay standing until all the members have been introduced. Charles Kingery, Francis Cannon, John Cannon, Keith Guillory, Russell Reeves, Cindy Horton, Mark Horton, Michelle Coleman, Joe Peake, Reverend Wallace Shaw, and Clue Ford. If you are interested, y'all can see. Joining this movement, We the People, please scan the QR code to register with our database and check the box for membership. The membership will free. One of the two. The information will only be used to keep you informed of any future information and that you need. The QR code is on the program you picked up at the front door. Also, listed on the program is a link that will let you keep up with any legislative sessions regarding the CO2 capture and future filings of carbon capture, and you'll see it listed on your program there. We have a panel of guest speakers here this evening to share their knowledge of the CO2 capture, eminent domain, water table risk, your health, property value, mineral rights, your life, and how we can move forward from here. We ask that everyone be respectful as each speaker shares their knowledge. There will be an open floor question and answer period after all panelists have spoken. This period will be done in an orderly manner, so please give your full undivided attention to the end. We have a lot of information to share in a short time. Please wait until this period to ask any questions. At this time, we will start with panelist number one.
Good evening. Joe Pinkford. We're going to start off by presenting a video. Video which is going to demonstrate the dangers and sometimes consequences of CO2 exposure into the environment. The first section is going to cover the mishap in Mississippi, and then the second section of the video is going to cover Lake Neos in Cameroon. The thing that just full disclosure, the Cameroon is not a pipeline leak. It looks like there was a natural CO2 exposure, but the consequences and the danger is still the same. The CO2 gets out into the environment.
In 2020, a pipeline carrying carbon dioxide ruptured in Mississippi. The plume of toxic waste forced hundreds to evacuate and sent 50 people to the hospital with dizziness, seizures, some even foaming at the mouth. First responders said it was like a zombie movie.
Hey, number one. Exactly what happened. My mom cried, and I ran to like a lot of people, like a lot of boys who went on. So I go, can you do my slow?
Give my brother and mom, first cousin, decided to, take a day on fishing. Went up there, and we fished there by the time. We were on our way back. And he had come about 7 o'clock. I saw a big float. I was very happy. And she just pulled big clouds over up in whatever was up in the air. And I called my brother immediately. And I told her, Mom, this pipeline that blew up down here, you know, out there from the shop. Time to turn on Curry Road off the street. The car just shut off when they needed. I woke up in the hospital.
We have also with us, we have Michael Brown, and probably his youngest brother, okay, and tell us what about that phone call and what you were doing when it came and what happened.
I showed up. We didn't come, so I gathered in that house and I didn't do that now. It was close to the work through. People will call because you got to get out, you got to get out. Go things, stay, go things, go. You know, it was just like chaos all around.
You couldn't go.
I couldn't go. I had to stay with my car. I had to stay. I was trapped.
He was great.
They were ready.
The youngest was
He was about 4 months at the time.
okay, the others were a little bit older.
Yes,
And 1.5,
yes.
and that started getting a lot worse.
Both of them, that the little girl, she even had more than his explosive.
Basically, kids.
Yes,
Gave it up.
I gave it up. What y'all would do me?
Yeah.
No.
Over the weekend, residents become sick and even more had to leave their homes after a gas leak and explosion in Nazareth County. Around 300 residents evacuated their carbon dioxide and hydrogen sulfide that leaked into the air after the incident here at Slim Tarsha.
I think the leak happened when it broke out somewhere at 7 o'clock. The company did call in until somewhere closer to 8 to say, hey, we got CO2. So we didn't know what we had earlier. And we had no idea the CO2 won't smell, we won't see it. But fortunately, once we got closer, we could hear the meter. It sounded like a jet engine crash in the backyard. Our vehicle starts, didn't slow, so we decided to take copy and exit at that point. So we were addressing the code as if it was a fire, or a gas, whatever we were recovering. And my crew got there side by side and we noticed coming in, it sounded like it was running back road. But we won't run very well. And we were passing these cars. They were sitting in the middle of the night, with headlights on, maybe the flash was on, some of the doors open, some not open. Nobody ever introduced, just been like they just vanished. So we continued on in the town, there was a deputy from Jackson County that started searching the door to get no protection. And finally he got that shade, just like everybody else was coming out of there. We had to get him out of the hot zone to get medical treatment. But they're just laying there, bottle covered, on the ground, like on Amazon. Come up on another vehicle and drive records, have vehicles. Got victims. Like, I don't have to say anything about it. And at that point, just spit and sputter. So we go out, I told her, I was, just go find somewhere, just have to run. Even if you have to bring it in, you drive, don't let it out. So he did that, and turned around. We started busting windows, looking inside there. I didn't get there a lot. Just from outside the window. You could barely see any reservations. They were all somewhere to see, all of them falling from that out. And if you get to watch them close with the bed, you read 6 times a minute, 8 times a minute, which is just fine. Once we got them out, but then the analysis, which is another ordeal for the rural community, multiple analysis that most communities like that don't have one. You fill it up, that's it. So we had some more coming from surrounding cities and counties. At that point, the command post said that the weather service is a plume model, see where this gas is. And based on the plume model, through the village, across the river, and into some agricultural fields where it has some sporadic housing. I think we got an additional need out of those houses and brought them back. We could take to the hospital. I think 40 or 50 people were taken to the hospital. After the event, we went closer to the site, and everything was ice. The road was ice, the trees were ice, the wildlife was ice, everything was ice. That's the only way I knew there was some kind of security first.
It has been 5 days since a major gas leak in Yazoo County sent a whole town fleeing their homes.
But throughout the week, boats have been treated and virtually everyone back in their homes, but the burden has not fell away.
Spokesman Allen joins us in studio and explains how these folks are feeling.
One of the closest to Highway 3, the Douglas family home, was hit hard by the carbon dioxide leak, but they were one of the last to get out.
When they brought the dogs out to use the bathroom before we go to bed, the dogs come back in, she didn't come back in, she was laid up against the corner, she couldn't breathe. I got her in the house, I called the sheriff's department, and they told me we had a gas leak.
So they did require treatment in the hospital, and moving back in Sunday, Larry and his wife had found themselves coughing frequently and ill.
Been sick in the stomach, can't eat, don't have no appetite, having headaches. We were sitting at the table eating supper the other night. I looked over at her, she had blood running down her nose.
While the company in Denver has shut off the pipe and begun the repair process, the Douglases and others have trouble settling back in, fearing an accident like this could happen again.
One of Africa's most bizarre natural disasters occurred on the 21st of August 1986 in a remote mountainous region of northwest Carolina. It's estimated that between 1,700 to 2,000 people lost their lives. When outsiders entered the area after the disaster, they found whole villages full of corpses and pastures full of dead cattle. People had seemingly died where they stood or slept. The bodies of men, women and children lay sprawled in the roads or dead in their beds. The bodies showed no signs of physical trauma, and to compound the mystery, this tragedy occurred in a remote rural area. There seems to be no explosion, no volcanic eruption, and with no industry using toxic materials anywhere nearby, it seems a mystery as to what could have caused such deadly devastation. The answer lay in one of the strangest natural disasters to have happened in modern times. At 9:30 p.m. on August 21st, 1986, a loud rumbling noise was heard coming from the land. A huge bubble of water and carbon dioxide gas rose up from the bottom of the land, sending a column of spray 100 meters into the air and sending a 25-meter high line across the surface of the lake. At the same time, an estimated 1.2 million cubic meters of gas was released into the atmosphere. This gas cloud, big composed carbon dioxide, which settled in there, began to sink down, forming a layer 50 meters thick, which then flowed over the crater lip, down into the valley towards the surrounding villages. The effects were instantaneous and devastating. The gas cloud passed through the villages of Nios, Cham, Cam, and Sebul, killing estimated 1,700 to 2,000 men, women, and children. Around 3,500 cattle, which is the main source of income for the villagers, were also killed. Incredibly, in the midst of all this death, there were one or two survivors. One of them described the moment that the disaster unfolded. I could not speak. I became unconscious. I could not open my mouth because then I smelled something terrible. I heard my daughter snoring in a terrible way, very abnormal. When crossing to my daughter's bed, I collapsed and fell. I was there till 9 o'clock the next morning. A friend of mine came and knocked at my door. I was surprised to see that my trousers were red and had some stains like honey. I saw some starchy mess on my body. My arms had some wounds. I didn't really know how I got these wounds. I opened the door. I wanted to speak. My breath would not come out. My daughter was already dead. I went into my daughter's bed thinking that she was still sleeping. I slept until it was 4:30 in the afternoon. Then I managed to go over to my neighbours' houses. They were all dead. I decided to leave. I got on my motorcycle. As I rode through Nios, I didn't see any sign of any living thing. At a distance of 25 kilometres from the lake, the cloud began to dissipate, and some people braved to flee, although many suffered from symptoms of gas poisoning. Around 800 survivors were treated at the main hospital in Youngford. It was believed that many of the victims had been poisoned by a mixture of gases that included hydrogen and sulphur, although later doctors concluded that death had occurred from carbon dioxide asphyxiation.
Okay, just one thing for that video. In Mississippi, the Denbury pipeline that runs from Mississippi into Louisiana through southern Allen Parish, just in our backyard, and then into Texas. So it's close.
Willie, you did a good job. And, I don't know, just thinking. Is it on? Just thinking about everything that's gonna happen, that will happen. I started out in the oil field, had to find something to do. We plugged these wells. And I've seen these welders get down in the holes, cut the casing off. They're going to weld the cap on the weld belchers. We pull the welder out of the hole. And company man says, "You got any weld on it?" And says, "Yeah, made that in." So all that being said, back in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, I was in the 80s when I saw this. Who plugged those wells? Who capped it? Who welded the cap? Who pumped the concrete in that case? Every wildcat, drill here, drill there, drill here, we get it. It's all in the creek. Let's drill there, nothing, drive. Oh, get two over here. Dump it down. There's no record of what was capped and what was not capped. And everybody's going, no, this isn't a good deal. No, we might not see it on the grand sheet. You mark it down, you're going to see it. Because when it's like a bunch of straws, hundreds of thousands of these open-ended casings from these old wells. They're not recorded with drill. Carlos myself, I don't know. You know, he wouldn't look at it. He did. His name was a lot of stuff around New Orleans. his grandson just told me something. Me and my geologist, Larry Dickerson, met him out at a hearing, and he told us. But I'm gonna cut it short. I'm not a geologist. I don't intend to be. I worked out there. I talked to some guys that work pipelines, and man, you heard about this. We're gonna come. You know, everybody's seen this kind of work and worked around this kind of stuff and was exposed to this deal. It's not good. Everybody over here's got 3 or 4 water wells on their rice farms. You got crawfish. I see some crawfish people here. It contaminates when, not if. It will get in the 250 to 60 billion tons, it said. Or however many tons they were put in the ground. You don't think it's going to blow out? It will find these little old wells that's not flooded sooner or later. And it will cost. Amoco tried to frack the Wilcox back in the 80s. 100% salt. They made 400 barrels. They fracked it. 100% salt. Plug it, squeeze it, 200 barrels. Let's leave it like that. You cannot frack this down here. It's not the same as fracking in Haynesville Shore. We know where it's going to go. They don't know where it's going to go. Amoco could do it. We have 4D. We have better technology. 4D. Why they still drilling right? Figure that out. And the only way they're going to know that this CO2 is going to stay right in this little area right here, that this high-tech 4D is going to tell us where it's going to stay, is if they put some kind of radioactive something in there and inject it in the ground and let's see where it goes now. Well, when it hits these saltwater zones and sands, and that doesn't just frack like it fracks up there, it cracks the rock and you're getting oil and gas recovery, okay? You're not going to be recovering anything with this CO2. You're going to have a bowl just like what happened now. And it's going to start going through these saltwater sand zones or whatever. And I'm not a geologist, but it might stay right here where they said it's going to stay. I don't think it will. Not all these open holes and not the way they were fracking back then. And the technology, the 4D technology, will not show you where this is going to stay. It's not going to stay in A, B, and C. It's going to go to L and L. And that's all I can say. I mean, I just wish I had some geologist friends that said that they'd like to come. They're in Texas, and if we need them later on, we've got it. Okay, so 7/8 pilot. And Jackie Swift was the head guy out there at Crown Cove. And he told us to get our air packs and put them on. There was a man in the tank that was cleaning the tank bottoms, a lot of paraffin, sand, whatnot there. He was cleaning. They hired us to get our packs on the man down in the tank. And we had to tie put the driving out of there, some of the stuff in there. And we drug him out. And immediately, Jackie Swift from Henderson was the head guy. I want to say that.
Well, I'm on the tiptoes there, going back to Charles, getting this microphone. Thank y'all for showing up, and I appreciate each and every one of y'all. And I'd like to thank our elected officials for being here tonight and helping us out and trying to see where we go to from here. But I think the common theme about this is, what are the risks? And, I don't think we really know the risks. We don't really know the facts about it. So I'm going to try to give you as much as I know. I'm a fourth generation Louisianian. I'm a landowner, have grandchildren, and I think that's one of the main reasons that I'm here tonight for us and our grandchildren is we got to try to figure this out together. And what are the risks? What is CCS? What is carbon dioxide? What might it do to us?
There you go.
Okay, that's kind of self-explanatory. I'm going to have to do fast because the Flo has already told me she's going to cut the microphone off. But really, carbon dioxide, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but this is a basic building block. We have to have carbon dioxide. Plants use it. Without carbon dioxide, we'd be in ice age right now. And just for those who like this kind of stuff, I know my science teacher is proud of me right now. But carbon dioxide is, it's just simply carbon, and it's two oxygens, forms a molecule, carbon atom and two oxygen. But, something I want to talk about real quick. It's only 70% carbon, and 30% carbon and 70% oxygen. So, you heard already, it's odorless, you don't know what's coming. Carbon dioxide is part of our natural metabolism. CO2 levels in the air right now is about 420 parts per million. And once you get into some of the cities, it may be higher than that. Just wanted to point out real quick, that's a very small amount. If you look at, the atmosphere, you look at how much carbon dioxide makes up. It's a very small portion. Argon is not even 1%, and carbon dioxide is 0.04%. The carbon cycle is where, we have carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, the trees take it, and they eat it, and, they give out oxygen. Without this, we wouldn't be alive right now. So, you're going to hear me talk about nature-based projects and green-based projects. And you're going to hear the CCS people talk about synthetic forests. I'm not sure what that is. I'm trying to figure out what that is, but maybe they'll educate me to what a synthetic forest is. I know what trees are. Okay, we've heard good. We're here to good. We're all going to be rich, and we're going to be the Beverly Hillbillies, and we're going to have mining tractors, and all these stories that we've heard about this, and it's real beneficial to our economy. Some of those things I'm not quite so sure about, but what I want to focus on right now is the bad and the ugly, because I don't think we've been told the entire story. Carbon dioxide is really bad for you. And we're taking something right now that's basically harmless to us, although you'll get a lot of argument from climate change folks, which I'm not here to argue that tonight. That's another discussion. But right now it's harmless. We're taking it and turning it into something that's very dangerous to us. For over a century, carbon dioxide has been recognized as a hazard in the workplace. I think it's about, if I remember right, it's about 100 people every year die from carbon dioxide poisoning. Just a little bit of carbon dioxide can cause you health problems too. It doesn't have to be a whole lot. You know, one of the things that we talk about is how do we get here? You know, this is the international organization, IPCC, and you know, they talk about all this climate change and temperature rise and that sort of stuff. But you know, I put this up here for a reason. This is their top 3 priorities, the international group who handles this. And you can see there in the 3rd priority, it didn't take them long to get to the money part. You know, I'm not arguing that, you know, carbon dioxide is not going up in the atmosphere. We're not sure about how much we contributed, how much is man contributed to that. Definitely increasing according to the scientists. You know, the temperature is increasing also. But is it significant enough to endanger, you know, the drinking water supply for Southwest Louisiana? I don't think so. You know, they show this in a neat little diagram, this carbon capture stuff, and they have point source where they capture from the plants and everything. All their pictures are real beautiful. They got boats and water and all those things. Well, we have all that already, folks. I don't know what they're offering us because we have those things already. You know, and here's these big fans that they're going to remove carbon dioxide from the air. And one of my questions about this being a mechanical person, a person of mentions, I'm like, well, how far can you suck carbon dioxide away? And the answer was significantly definitely. I'm like, well, I don't know about that. I don't think that's going to work. I think you'll better suck it from a short distance. But being in such a small percentage of the atmosphere, I don't think you're going to be able to get it all. That's just my opinion. You know, it requires a tremendous amount of energy to this process. You can see some of the statistics that's been looked at. It's going to require anywhere from, 46 to 191% of our energy requirements worldwide. So that alone, our energy bills, they're estimated to go up 30 to 40% if we are somehow able to implement this at scale, which I think we can. The Green New Deal is how this was funded, and this has been going on for years. And, being kind of an environmentalist myself, I actually think the environmentalists are good when on this. I think the companies were saying, hey, look here, we can make a bunch of money by agreeing to this. So in a way, I don't blame the companies. Saying, hey, we can capture CO2, we can inject it underground, but I don't think injecting it under our ground is a good idea. What I have another big concern with is eminent domain for private gain. I think that's unconstitutional, and I think that needs to be abolished in the state of Louisiana. But you'll hear that this is kind of, it's not very broad, and it's not going to happen in a lot of areas. You can see the map right here. This is planned for a lot of parishes in Louisiana. It's not just us, folks. This is going to be a statewide proposal for it's over with. Over 500 organizations have called for, this is not a good idea. This is not a good idea. I'm not going to get into them, but you can see from all of the comments that it's not going to work and the cost is just too high to implement this. Here's what I like to look at. This is an independent organization which I'm a member of. Taxpayers of Common Sense. You can see how they look at it. And this is true. I think we spent about $20 billion already on this stuff. And I haven't seen CO2 go down in the atmosphere, and I haven't seen the temperatures decrease except under a big old oak tree, a shade oak tree, then the temperatures decrease underneath that. We've already heard what happened in Mississippi, so continue to educate yourself about how dangerous this stuff is and what has happened already. To me, experience is what matters, not what somebody tells us. Their opinion, experience matters. Let's look at that one closer. Okay, we already saw about the spill. We saw about this gentleman where he was passed out in the car. His mother was waiting on him, people almost died. I think if it would have been closer than 5,000 feet, we would have had some dead people, unfortunately. The government decided what caused the incident was too much rain and hilly terrain. Well, folks, that sounds like a lot of places in Louisiana to me, because we get some rain here, a lot of it. Talking about pipeline leaks, let's talk about pipeline safety. We've only had a couple of spills. You'll hear about a couple of leaks, a couple of ruptures. Well, that's not the big picture, because over the years, we've had several leaks, across the state, in Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi. So pipelines, unfortunately, they do rupture. Okay, this hit personally for me, the one down in Sulphur, because my daughter-in-law, she passes through there twice a day with my 3 grandchildren. And a little bit of background on this, the lady that lives there with her children, her cat is acting funny, and she called her mom and said, "Mom, the cat's acting funny, and I think I hear a hissing noise." And her mom, like us, a little bit older than that, said, "Get in the car, grab the kids." She instantly thought about the pipeline, and they got out of there, fortunately. So thank goodness we didn't have a lot worse leak in this situation, because it could have, because what I understand, the response time was not acceptable. You're going to hear a lot of argument about you can't have earthquakes in Louisiana. We just had one up in northwest Louisiana. And you can look at the USGS statistics. The USGS is actually predicting major earthquakes, 25 to 50% chance, and it increases greatly as you move further to the north. And this is not my opinion, folks. We're going to be sitting on a ticking time bomb if that happens. This is the United States Geological Survey data. You can look at the fault lines. The fault lines are actually increasing across the state. You're going to hear some people comment and say, "Well, we're not like California." And I say, "Well, thank goodness." But, our fault lines aren't increasing. I'm not talking about the angels winning the Pentagon. I'm talking about a disaster that happened to us. I wish that's what we were debating here tonight, is who was going to win the World Series, but that's not the case. We saw about the land, we saw the dead animals, killed the insects, killed the flies. This was for 15 miles, all this damage just fall out from this. And some people's going to say, "Well, how's that related to what we're talking about?" Well, the way it relates is they only had 1.6 million tons, and we're talking about 250 million metric tons in one site over here in one hole. That's how it relates, folks. The good of it is, that's the only reason I put that in there. Life is simple. One time we had a situation back on the farm over there in Pittman. My grandpa, he was at the barn milking the cow. Somebody drove up in the driveway. I was going back to the chickens getting ready for school. They were blowing their horn, and that was like 911 call back in those days, y'all. And, we didn't have none. So I went running around, and I was so excited. The guy was standing at the gate. He said, "Where's Uncle Rich at?" I said, "Well, he's at the cow milking the barn." Folks, I'm afraid that's where we're at right now, unfortunately. This is not a Democratic issue. This is not a Republican issue. This is not a conservative, a liberal. This is all of us together, folks. That's the only way we're going to be able to fight this. These folks have been across the cash cow, like I say, we're 7,100% up to trillions of dollars. And sometimes I really like to know what people are thinking. I really would, y'all. To me, this is how I summarize the CCS proponents. This has been a lopsided discussion from the start to me, and we need to have both sides, and we need to hear both sides equally on carbon capture and injection. And one thing I like to say to these people who are promoting this, inject it in your backyard, and then we'll talk. Let's talk about one of the big concerns of aquifers. Let's zero in on our Chico aquifer here, folks. What happens when CO2 meets water, it forms carbonic acid. And you get a lot of, it starts to affect your pH, and you get leaching. And you can even leach out heavy metals over time. If that happens, folks, we're done. I've been to some of these meetings where the CCS folks, not picking on them by any stretch, but they hold up a can of Coke and they tell the audience, "Oh, it's just like drinking a can of Coke." And I'm sitting there chuckling, and I'm going, "Well, I know what happens when you pour Coke on the battery. Because I've done it before, and y'all do too. It's very acidic, and it will cause some major problems." A good pH is about 6.5 to 8.5 for drinking water. And I'm throwing this out to us as a people. We need to start looking at these kinds of things, and we need to say, "Look, this is our baseline," and we need to start measuring it and saying, "You're not allowed to mess with that. We're not going to allow you to tamper with that." With regards to pipelines, I understand that now they can build a pipeline or injection well 500 feet from the street, y'all. That's unacceptable. We've got some upcoming bills, some legislation that's going to help us out, and hopefully we make some progress down in the next legislative session. To me, being a biologist, being a scientist, and being a natural resource specialist, this hits close to home because I've always said this, growing up out in the woods, being raised by my grandparents, and going to McNeese and going to LSU and becoming somewhat educated, is this scientist, he used to think that we could solve this with science. And he's changed his mind now, just like I have, and a lot of us. It's going to take, to solve our environmental problems are selfishness, greed, and apathy. And we don't know how to deal with that as scientists, y'all. We're going to have to deal with that collectively as people. Scientists are not going to be able to solve this alone. But thank y'all very much. I appreciate each and every one of y'all. Thank y'all.
Hey, everybody.
All right, I'm so thrilled to see how many people in the community are here tonight. My name is Katie Burns. I'm a local physician. I work right down the road. I work in the express care. I hold multiple positions in the community, including with the coroner's office, like president of the hospital, or in the emergency room. I do hospitalist work. I do clinic work. I hold degrees in undergrad for chemistry and biology. My medical degree from Shreveport and LSU, and then the rest of my training in Alexandria at Red Peas. I hold a board certification for family medicine. I'm here tonight because I was asked by a patient, actually, that was concerned, and I keep getting these questions over and over and over from my neighbors, from my family, from other local members. Should I be concerned? Is this something that I should be concerned about? Now, I can't really speak to the environmental impact or even the economic impact, but I think that it would behoove all of us to consider environmental impact, economic benefits, and what type of health problems this could cause. So just to give you a little insight on CO2, this is something I deal with on a regular basis. People that have COPD, or chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, and emphysema. This is a ventilation disorder, and they cannot get CO2 out. So the first thing that happens is they get CO2 narcolepsy, so they become confused, they get a headache, they become nauseous, and if that is prolonged, then that can lead to things like, such as coma, and then eventually death if everything is done in a timely manner. So I also have, that's something that we see pretty regularly in the emergency room, in the hospital, in the clinics. So if there were to be CO2 that's compressed, and for some reason it's evacuated from the area that it's at, or a pipe was burst, it could be detrimental to the surrounding area. This is 100%, there's no question about that, you have dire impacts. As he said earlier in his presentation, 300 to 400 parts per million is what is normal inside or normal atmospheric pressure for CO2. At around 10,000 parts per million, you'll start seeing some slight increase in respiratory response. At about 15,000 to 20,000 parts per million, then you'll start seeing the increased headache, nausea, maybe a little bit of confusion. And as that is increased, then the chance of death becomes more and more. If you were removed from the situation, what would be the long-term effects if you were next to this potential outburst of CO2? Well, if you were there long enough and get obviously the result, but if you were able to survive and were removed from the situation, you could have an oxic brain injury that would be concerning. The long-term sequelae would be the preferred for the patient. So I think that it is something that we should be concerned about. I also think that we should give everything consideration. But my concern with my local community, my patients, and my family, I think that we hired a company to come in and do a probability or risk analysis for us. But what we want to know is what's the probability of an occurrence. So I'm kind of a numbers guy, and I like numbers because numbers don't lie, numbers don't have feelings, numbers are just numbers. And so let's assign some numbers, some of the probabilities of an event. Let's look at the whole picture of CO2, and then let's decide whether it's a good decision for our parish. So if you look at, they estimated the tax credit for the CO2 sequestration is going to be about $30.3 billion between 2022 and 2042. And you say, well, again, $30 billion is a lot, and we're going to use Exxon. I'm going to pick on Exxon tonight because they're involved in this. But last year, Exxon made $32.8 billion in profit. So why are we giving Exxon a quarter of $30 billion, right? We're using the general term of $85 per ton for credit. This is what they'll get credited for capture. And it can be as high as $180 a ton for direct capture, direct air capture. But in a refining process, for every 100 tons of process, you can count on about 10 tons of CO2. And I'm going to use tons as a general number. I'm not going to specify metric, imperial, or U.S. because they're pretty close. So for every 100 tons of process, you're going to generate about 10 tons of CO2. And when you start looking at it, there's 17,000 plus cubic feet of CO2 per ton. And if we use the 30 billion factor just for that credit, we're talking about injecting about 6 billion cubic feet of CO2 subsurface, which that's a lot of CO2. And what bothers me about that is I think that within 10 years, CO2 sequestration will be obsolete. If you look at some of the new research, I think the University of Connecticut, the last time I saw, they have a catalyst process that they can put in line with manufacturing and use a catalyst that's made out of nickel and iron, which is a pretty inexpensive catalyst to capture your CO2. As we're doing it now, we're going to have to strip it with amines. And so I have a question about what percentage of the gas stream that's subsurface injected is actually going to be CO2. Are we going to have a 2%, 1%? Because I can guarantee you in business, if my permit says I can inject an additional 2% of the waste stream, that baby's going down the hole. And enough of you guys, I know some of you that have been in the business, you know that if you're cleaning a tank and you've got 10% gas in double bottom solids, and you water a lot for ship down line, it's going to be 10%. You're not going to ship this stuff if you ship that stuff. And again, this was a picture, this was a sulfur site that's had multiple failures. And so when we do a risk assessment, there's a number of things that you have to look at for risk assessment. Number one, you've got to look at common. When I work for Exxon, or when I work for Occidental, if I apply for a contract, they're going to want to know all my safety numbers. What's my experience modifier rate? What's my probability of having an they're going to ask that of me, so we need to ask that. And unless we need to ask that. So what's the probability of the owner, its contractors, and its subgroups, like in Europe? And so, when you look at a risk assessment, there's already industry numeric values. And we're going to go over a few of those. So you have a number for the owner, and it's not just a geological assessment. I'm not going to get into the geological person because we paid somebody to do that, so let's let them do the job. So a pipeline failure, the probability of a pipeline, 0.0001 is 0.1%. Okay? This is published, this is an industry standard. So for every 1,000 kilometers, that's a kilometer is what, about 6.63 miles, a little over half a mile. There's one failure every 2 years for 1,000 kilometers. So we can use 0.001 or we can use 0.0005. But we can assign a number to the probability of an event happening. So in a pipeline, and I know there's millions of miles of pipelines, but we know that there's a fire every 4 days, there's an explosion 26 days. The annual projected failure rate for a wellhead is 1%, 0.01. Okay? Fatigue is the primary cause. These are industry standards. And so, and you guys have been drilling, I see Bob's here, there's a number of you that do this, but 1 to 4 in 10 of all drilling operations fail. Man, that's a tremendous rate. And if you don't want to use the 10% rate, use the 5% rate, use any rate that you want, you have to assign a number to the probability of a failure on. You know, when you look at what I mentioned earlier, you have to look at contaminants in the well or in the waste stream that could cause corrosion. I'm going to pick on Exxon because they're involved and they're really easy to pick on because they're a $300 million corporation. But on December 11, 2024, the Fifth Circuit upheld a civil penalty against Exxon for $14,250,000. Now, that's, you think with a $32 billion profit, $300 billion company, that's not a lot of money. But if you talk to Craig, he'll tell you a lot of the civil penalties have established rates that they can charge. You can't charge anymore. You have a limit between. But that one penalty was for 16,000 environmental violations. If I wanted to go to work for Exxon and they saw that I had 16,000 violations, Exxon would not. I mean, you would work in the industry. I said something here, you know what the answer would be. And it's easy to go on Exxon and look at some of their major failures. And if you go back not too far, and I remember this one well, was the Valdez in '89. They tried to get us to send all of our equipment there. It's in Puget Sound. But there were 3 reasons for the accident. It was human error because they had an intoxicated captain, and it's what I call the old Bill factor. And everybody knows that works in the industry, there's old Bill back there, right? He's going to back over something, run over something, break something, drink something. There's that human factor that is the intoxicated captain. They had an overworked crew. We have a short workforce these days. That's not uncommon. And then we had, to a lesser penalty, lesser degree, they had inadequate traffic regulation by the U.S. Coast Guard. That particular event, they had $900 billion in state, federal, and civil penalties. They had $500 billion in civil penalties. And those numbers won't include the cleanup and nobody would be there. Okay? So if we look at the probability of an event, and we said it's a 10% for pipeline, or you make it half that. It's 1% for wellhead. It's 10%, up to 10% for drilling. And there's got to be a number assigned to human error, right? For the owner there. So what's the number for the probability of an event? And so down in Sikorsha, they said the incident involved an extremely rare combination of events. That was Jesse Harris's Summit Carbon Solution. That's known. Now I'm going to give you these numbers. I'm saying there's maybe an 11% probability of some failure in the process during the year, whether it's the pipeline, it's the wellhead, it's the formation itself. And that number 0.0 to that 8 zeros, 342, some of y'all see me put that number up. Y'all know what that is? I bet you some of you out there has got Powerball tickets in your car right now, right? That number reflects the probability of winning the Powerball. But you know something about the Powerball? Somebody always wins. Right? And it's just a matter of time. It's not when, or it's not that it's going to happen tomorrow. It may not happen in my lifetime, but we're going to have major events. And then we're most concerned about an event in the formation. Right? I've got a Coke around here. Doc, you want that Coke I showed? You want to open it? That's what CO2, that's Henry's law in physics. That's CO2 when articulates through the formation, that's what's going to happen. So, anyway, that's it for me, and that's the culture. Thank you for your time.
I wish I had a little cheat sheet up here, but I don't. I'm just going to talk. I'm Renee Savant, and I am usually not front and center. I'm always behind the scenes. I usually am the one that you read if you follow the Louisiana CO2 Alliance Facebook page or website. I do the writing and the posts and try to keep you informed with what's going on with our alliance. I'm not here this evening as an expert, an official, politician. I'm standing here this evening as a citizen, a concerned citizen just like you. Like most of you, I had no idea that the CO2 initiative was going on until I got a phone call from a gentleman by the name of Roland Collins one day. And I have a little homestead. I used to spend a lot of time in Baton Rouge. I served under 3 governors. And I walked away a long time ago because I got tired of seeing what I saw. And when I would get back to Baton Rouge, I felt dirty. I would take baths all weekend long after a board meeting. And so I spent most of my time at my homestead raising my chickens and let everything just go. But when I found out about this little thing called carbon capture and what was happening or is going to happen to our water, our land, our future generations, I had to take a stand. If you would have told me I would be fighting an environmental issue, I would have told you that you were crazy. I always fought for economic development. I fought for the little small business guy when I was doing my battles in Baton Rouge. I have to be honest. I don't even recycle. We don't have recycling, and I don't go out of my way to recycle. So I can't call myself an environmentalist. But what I am is I'm a citizen that is very concerned about the future of Louisiana and very concerned with what my grandchildren will be left with if we don't stand up. So I want to take you back to the 70s. It's a long time ago. I want to age myself. I started out as an activist. The year was 1975. I was 15 years old, and I was a go-getter and a fighter. And I got the entire high school to do a walkout. All 400 kids to do a walkout because they removed the doors to the girls' bathroom because a couple girls were smoking. And they removed the doors. And so I felt like it wasn't fair for all of us to pay the price for a couple of girls. So I got all the kids to walk out of the school, and it was about to fight. Now let's move forward to today. I'm a little wiser, and I call myself a strategist. And there's a way that you go and you fight your battles. And without a strategy, you have a hard time moving forward. And that's my role, is to help guide everyone that is going to be part of the alliance through a strategy that our voices can be heard instead of just being loud, because we need to have a strategy. Because without a strategy, what happens, and the elected officials that are here tonight will tell you that they get hollered at all the time. And they hear a lot of people holler, so holler is we need to go. We need to have a strategy. March 18th, it will be available, an ebook. It will be that you will be able to go to our website, and it is going to be a step-by-step of how you, as an individual, if you've never made a stand, never sent an email, never made a phone call, how you can help in this movement and contact your elected officials. And doing the form emails, just a mass form email that everybody just sends the same email, that doesn't work. You need to tell your story. If you're a farmer and you're third generation, fourth generation farmer, what's this going to do to you? What's this going to do to your family? You know, so you need to tell your story, and when you call, you need to know what to say, but more importantly, you need to know what not to say. And so this is just going to be a step-by-step guide to guide you through that. You know, there was a very important battle that we fought here in Louisiana in 1850, the Battle of New Orleans. They were outnumbered. They had horrible weapons, but they won. They had determination, they had strategy, and they had unity. And if we are going to win this battle, that's what we need, because in this legislative session of 2025, this battle that we're fighting right now is going to be won or lost. And it's every one of us that need to come together, not just the Louisiana CO2 Alliance or we the people. It's going to take all of us. So I encourage you, if you're on Facebook, go to the Louisiana CO2 Alliance, follow us, you'll get a lot of good information. And then please join as a member, because our strength will come in the numbers of our members. And you can join on the website, or you can sign up in the back as you leave. If you didn't sign when you walked up, sign, because it's going to take every one of us. I thank you. God bless.
I'm sure you want to think that I don't know, I wasn't there in that school hall, but I tell you what, I think Mr. Navy wants to that door off. I tell you what, I wouldn't run for Dr. if Mr. Navy and Ms. Victoria was against me, but I would run for president if they was for me. They are just the real deal. You know, here's the thing, there's so much information that's been given and there need to be more. It's so important to inform people. You know, it's government's job to inform the public. You know, but sometimes government may not inform the public like they should. So it's important that the public then inform the government of the decisions that they make, that they might be concerned with. That's what we've been doing. And let me tell you what's very important. It's not about the bad deals, that we feel like this been passed. What's most important is that we have the most important folks with us here tonight. It's the ones that make the decision for our communities, for now and for the future. Look, this CCS is a very serious thing. Look, at the end of the day, communities should be able to decide if the benefit is worth the risk. It's just the right way to do it. Look, here's what we do know. Look, I'm an oil field guy. I've talked to a whole bunch of Mr. Bob engineers, a bunch of folks. I knew that it was more than minimum risk whenever I first heard about it. But you want to do a lot of research, you want to contact a lot of the people that you work with in the past, because you don't want to cripple a parish. Our parishes is poor, and we need finances, to advance our schools and advance everything. But I'm going to tell you what, when you really go and look to your water, the things that you have risk to through your communities, all the CO2 that will be pumped, just the one well, and we have two more potential wells, 150 million metric tons for one well. Every bit of that has to pass through our neighborhoods, through our communities. You know, look, CO2 is, as you've seen tonight, can be a very bad situation. But to me, them pipelines with that dangerous CO2, what worries me the most is every bit of it is headed to be injected below your water hoppers. This is new technology. They like to say that it's enhanced oil recovery, that we've been doing this 45, 50 years. Well, you've had a Class 2 permit for that long. Why did you need a Class 6 for this? Look, let me say this. What's so important to people when times like this come? It matters to the people that you have elected and put in office. Look, we have our senators, we have our representatives. We have them, all the way, Mr. McCormick, all the way from Allen Parish. These are the folks that's going to make the difference in this next session. Look, they stayed in the Senate. You know, I believe in the House, we've got bills, Mr. Carrier, Representative Carrier, and Representative Owens, and I think several of them are bringing bills to allow the people to vote. The people decide if the risk is worth the reward. That's outstanding. We need that. We need it to get into the Senate. You know, we need the Senate to move on to the governor. And because it's important that citizens have the last say with these things, not corporations, not anybody else. Look, we need to protect our communities and our generations, not on what experts say out of LSU or what experts say they have the most demand from these companies. You hear a lot of good information here tonight. But look, so we have bills that's going to try to help you get our people in this vote. But if these things come, we've got other very, very important bills that we're working with our legislators. I thank God that we have, look, today, right here tonight, look at all the legislators that we have here sitting on our behalf and standing on our behalf. I appreciate everyone. Look, we've been strong supporters of our governor and our legislators. That has not changed. But this session is the most important session, I believe, in our history, because this is a very serious thing. Keep them in your prayers as they move forward. Keep our parishes in our prayers. And God bless each and every one of you. And you know what? We had 6 teams out of 6 schools, I believe, that was in the girls' playoffs tonight. There's no telling what we would have had here if them girls would have killed their grandmas and grandmas they called in and eaten popcorn. God bless everyone.
stranded oil. Because what Denbury wanted to do was to take that well and convert it into a CO2 injection well. And as I was told later, that particular company, or Exxon now, would just go ahead and take over the land and expropriate it. And I said, well, how are you going to value the amount of oil that we're not going to get? You know, because you convert this well to a CO2 injection well. The whole idea of expropriation, I think, it crawls up everyone's skin because you pay taxes on this property. All of a sudden, somebody has the conferred authority by the Department of Natural Resources, and nothing else has to happen. They get a certificate, and the Department of Natural Resources says, we don't have to be involved. We can be involved, we don't have to be involved. And so, of course, our president, Paul Leach, many of you may know the Leach family. Paul's a really good guy. He had no way wanted to participate in the CO2 injection because we were told by our attorney out of New Orleans that if you do allow this, if you have a number of your neighbors, landowners around you that want to participate in this, you may just be out of luck, because I think it's a 75-25 percentage, as we learned in that last committee meeting a couple of weeks ago. And so you're just going to have to play this out in court. Lord knows we don't want another court case. But that was what we were faced with as a company. So God, was led and stepped up, all the representatives, Charles Goldman, Brett Diamond, Dan McCormick, thank you all for paying attention. But it was an issue for us because we were going to lose some oil and gas minerals. I'm going to show you how. We're going to also address the safety issues. Many of you have already talked about that, so I really don't have to spend much time with those slides tonight. The economic feasibility of it was a big issue to me also, because when we were first approached, we were told we were going to make millions. And we were approached over about a 2-year period that you decide like you're going to make millions. And I'm like, well, what's the formula for making millions? I don't know if any of you have had that same, statement made to you. We certainly have to us, but nobody could really satisfactorily give me the formula for how we were going to make millions. If we bring a barrel of oil to the surface of the ground, and you're fortunate enough to be in a unit that's created by an oil and gas company, well then, for whatever you lease for, times the proportionate share of the unit that you have, that's what you're going to get, times the price of the oil or the gas, both. But there was no real formula for giving CO2, whether it's metric tons, whatever you want to measure it, to convert tax credits to actual cash. We had to research that. The next thing we'll talk about is really the authority granted to the Conservation Commission. When you start reading, and many of the representatives here have already read through it, when you start reading through the laws that have been changed and granted to the commissioner, it's really quite shocking, because he's going to be the one that tells you how much you're going to get, how much they're going to value your land at if they convert a reservoir to a now CO2 plume, and you won't really know what the commission is doing. How's it coming to that number? We do that in the oil and gas industry. As a geologist and geophysicist, we will make structure, net pay, isopath, volumetrics, give it to a reservoir engineer, and we have several reservoir engineers, and usually between the 2 or 3 that we use, we come up with a value. We generally can sell that to the market. If you're really in a hurry, you can have a fire sale, or you can have a fair market sale. So there's the science of what we do, the science side, but there's also the business side, because you definitely have to keep the ball rolling by finding investment dollars for every project that you come up with. And if the commissioner gets involved in a situation like this, and this is in the infancy now, from what I'm learning, that taking to the ultimate conclusion, it's like they're taking all
So what used to be the lifeblood of the Gulf South of America, it's no longer. The revenue is now being generated through businesses like Air Products that want to inject CO2 into the ground. Air Products, according to Ken Coates of the Lake Paul area, they're already out of business, and that's often what happens with companies that receive tax credits in order to sustain their business operation. They may give great salaries to their executives for a short time, but I can promise you, whatever country it's in, from Spain to the United States, if they're surviving on a tax credit, they eventually go out of business, and you end up with a graveyard of windmills, a solar farm, or what we're going to have here. It's really too soon to tell, but I think many of us are here because we have a genuine concern, and we're all, I think, reading the same theories. So I have all of this information, too much to read, I think. My main concern is once the commissioner realizes the danger of drilling into a CO2 plume, how willing is he even going to be to allow a well drilled through the CO2 plume to get the oil and gas that you believe is below your property? Where are the promised millions of dollars to participating landowners? Because what happens when the cost of operations exceeds those tax credits, and it will. Just like Air Products went out of business, the cost of operations will likely exceed the tax credits. You can sell captured CO2 into a very limited market, but I don't see millions of dollars there. So what's left, I think, is they can sell those tax credits. That is a game for the larger corporations to play. Exxon can play it. Our partner, we have a partner in Gilcorp for our West Charlton field. I've spoken with their attorney. They said, look, we don't understand how they're making money off of it. We looked at it from all sides, and we just can't see how they can make money on it. So if you have signed a participation agreement for carbon sequestration, you may be wondering, should I have signed that agreement? And I think that it's going to be a good solution to have all of us with our legislative help to try to turn back the clock, and that's what we pray for. Yes, we've all seen how dangerous pipelines can be. Lawsuits. There was a gentleman speaking in Baton Rouge where at length, if the service owner and the mineral owner are not the same, then you have a lawsuit that's likely going to happen. The greatest way to strand minerals is to have a lawsuit over your property, because investors, which we have to look for our projects that we get drilled, if there's a lawsuit anywhere around, they just don't want to be part of that. They need to go find a clean lease, something that's not going to just land in court over a period of time. They just won't do it. CO2, I'll just speak real quickly. I won't talk too long on this, but it does play a vital role just in our atmosphere. People have seen that. I mean, back in the days of the carbon inference, it was 10 times as high, and that would be about 4,000 parts per million, but there was a thriving, prolifically green earth at the time. My chief concern, state and federal governments, and we know this, are just moving way too fast for, to properly study all aspects of safety, legitimacy, economic feasibility of storing CO2. And I'll tell you, many scientists just doubt that storing CO2 really is going to accomplish any significant cooling effect on the planet. I put this book up here titled Unsettled, and advertised this to the Legislative Committee by Stephen E. Kuhn, publication 2019. It's not too difficult to read. I would encourage you to get that book. And there's my business card. Look, I've been doing this for 45 years now. Half of my time has been spent in the offshore, half in the onshore, offshore and onshore, almost equally split. So I work with geology and geophysics. I think Mike and Charles have talked a little bit about wishing they had some examples of seismic. I have an example of seismic data here that you'll see. sought after oil and gas zone. We look for oil and gas in the rural parts, north, south, east, and west, where this particular tract of land is. Why would you want to stick CO2 in sands that could be potentially hydrocarbon bearing? I just don't understand that at all. Listen, CO2 is purchased by nurseries and they put it in the greenhouses. So CO2 in the natural is not really a threat. You know, it's not an asphyxiant. It doesn't act that way until we concentrate it and put it into CO2 plumes. But if you buy a plant that's beautiful green, you bring it home, and it doesn't look as good because it's not in that same environment anymore. So CO2, as God put it in the atmosphere, is a good thing. We need it. Back in the days of the Carboniferous period, over on the left, you see the purple line, the CO2 is about 10 times higher, and we're now way on the right where it is now, about 420 parts per million. The light blue on the right is the temperatures. You can see in the middle of the Mesozoic where I put that red oil, temperature and CO2 really don't track. So often I've seen different presentations over the years, and I've looked at this particular issue for a long time, and to me, I feel like CO2 is more a result of, it's not a cause of natural global warming. So just keep that in mind. It's a result of, not a cause of, natural global warming. If you disagree with that statement, I'm going to ask you to prove it. This is an artist's rendition of what it looked like back in the Carboniferous period, where little, cattails grew to be 60 feet tall with a 10-foot cattail on the end of it. These are the various sources of CO2. If you just notice the ocean on the right is twice as much water as there is land. When the ocean is cool, they absorb CO2. When they warm, they release it. And there's all these other contributors of CO2. So if you put a direct air capture device or unit in the middle of that, I question the effectiveness of it. And so I think the legislator, if you're going to go forward with this, require that you have some accountability to it. The oceans, as I'm saying here, is a Atlantic multi-decadal oscillation. It acts like a radiator for the Earth. Warm ocean waters rise and cool ocean waters dive down deep. The graph at the bottom, if you can see that, is from 1860 to 2020. You can see it's on a regular pattern. Nothing dangerous to see here. Atmospheric composition, others have talked about it. You've got nitrogen 78%, oxygen 21%, argon 0.93, carbon dioxide is 0.04 roughly per day. If you had a 10,000 seat auditorium, that would take up about 4 seats. Okay, so that's what we're arguing about. Dr. John Christie, University of Alabama, Huntsville, says it's like a tug of war going on between the things that impact the surface of the Earth. And most of that is a downward atmospheric radiation, solar radiation, and carbon dioxide is a little tiny nail on the far right of the tug of war, right there. I think that somebody had a very similar graph up. But look at the metric tons of CO2 sequestered at the same time period that CO2 rose. So it can be argued that the Earth is simply replenishing CO2 from its main sources. That's my challenge. If you have a direct air capture system, turn it off for a couple of weeks and then step away about 300 feet from that unit and you monitor how much the CO2 has dropped in the surrounding area. My thought is not going to drop hardly at all because the Earth simply has a million sources of replenishing itself, which is natural to our environment. So this was a chart from 2016. NASA published this, and they said that a quarter to half of Earth's vegetated lands has showed significant greening over the last 35 years, largely due to rising levels of atmospheric carbon dioxide. And on the right, you see that this was an international team of 32 authors from 24 institution using all sorts of high-tech equipment to come up with that result. You'll see Africa down there is white, because that's the Sahara Desert. Let's look at that. 6,500 to 10,000 years ago, the Sahara was actually experiencing monsoon rains. And the lush vegetation was formed. We know this from fossil evidence left behind in the current Sahara. And this actually lasted for several thousand years. So whether it's exploding volcanoes, and that was Mount St. Helens in 1980, or deep hydrothermal vents, those vents occur all along the Mid-Atlantic Ridge between the North American continent and the European continent, the South American continent, and Africa. So those vents are just all along the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, and they do this 24/7, and we're all okay. Okay, so I'm not going to spend too much time here because everybody else pretty much already covered the problem with CO2 pipelines. But this particular graph was submitted by one of the pipelines up in Illinois, and in just a 5-minute period, you can see that, you may not be able to see, but the deep blue circle in the middle is the 50,000 parts per million cloud that being developed. And I thought that whoever had, I don't know if that was Mike, you saw the heavy cloud of CO2, and it just dropped. It's very heavy, and then it just spreads laterally. Those are the effects of it that I think Dr. Burns, read. And this same picture was used already by Exxon. It took 2 hours, by the way, for Exxon engineers to take control of this, not 5 minutes. Okay, so in 5 minutes, if you can get to 50,000, and this particular day was windy. But suppose it's not windy, and suppose that 2 hours it really spread just laterally. You can imagine. And then this is the same facility. I put this here because I find that if they have the ability to just take your land, and I've got, I think my veterinarian is one of my best friends. He's got a nice track, a little ranch. He's got some horses. He's worked very hard to develop that. Well, so today, they can just build a pipeline across it or put one of these compressor stations right there, if they wanted to, without getting his permission. And that's what the law reads. And it's really important. And I just think that everybody here that kind of feels that pain, because you wouldn't want that in your backyard, would you? And this was also shown the Exxon pipeline. Much of what was in Mississippi was purchased. Denbury already completed that. These I won't go through too much because you've already seen those catastrophes. I think that the bottom illustration is just a lake. They thought that maybe it was a landslide that entered the lake in South Africa and maybe disrupted the waters, but there actually was a video of it. And what I tend to think now is that maybe just the source of the CO2 got to a point to where it overcame the weight of the water that was holding it down finally. And that's a great example of what happens on the left. The offshore groups, Noble was one of them, have been investigating these safety measures for drilling into CO2 reservoirs. Let me tell you, when we build a well plan, there's so much regional and local information to build a well plan. You can study the mud rig they used, any kind of a gas kits they took, where to set your pipe because you can see the pressures applying in certain cases. You generally do a pretty good job of building that. But now that's a seismic line on the right. Suppose they had injected in a well, in the shallow upper third of that seismic line, had been injected CO2. That blue line is a fault. That's an actual fault that comes to the surface. And you see what I put there is a crawfish pond. That could very easily happen. And if we were drilling through that, and some of the CO2 leaked across that fault and finally dumped into where we were in the well, we're 5 or 10 years from now, and this has gone on unchecked, without your support, without your telling your legislature, look, we're really concerned about this. Suppose they have so many unchecked, unmapped, uncharted CO2 plumes, and you do get some drilling permits to drill, and you experience what they experience in terms of a blowout. That, to me, is a likely occurrence. So, I put it here because it is heavier than air. It's heavier than natural gas. Natural gas, methane, when we get that, it rises. Not CO2, it's just cells. And it starts spreading laterally. So this is the study that was done by Noble as well. And much of these reports, I mean, they're saying that it gets to 5% saturation. Well, 5% is 50,000 parts per million. So 50,000 parts per million is way bigger than 4,000 parts per million, what we had back in the carbon interest period. You see, that was natural. That was a natural occurrence, but it caused prolific growth. 50,000 parts per million is really causing a catastrophe. So, creating a CO2 plume isn't like drilling to anticipated gas, oil reserves. Why? Because well planners have a long and broad regional and local well history that generally surrounds exploratory wells and development wells. Creating a CO2 plume can require special casing that's resistant to CO2 or carbonic acid. I've read recently where some of the am I going too long? I am. I'm going too long. This is the 186,000 straws of abandoned wells in Louisiana. This is just going over the economics, other concerns from the commissioner, which I've already outlined for you. And in conclusion, look, CO2 is vital to our existence. We need it. But the real problem is creating a plume that's unmapped. You know, where are the promised millions of dollars to landowners? What's the formula to convert tax credits into distributable cash? I don't think it exists. How likely is it the commissioner will prohibit drilling through a CO2 plume in the future? I think it's pretty likely if we don't do anything about it. We'll just sit back and do nothing. Lawsuits, yes, they are a problem. But leaky faults are a real problem because I think if they just do that, especially in an area where it's not a four-way closure. Four-way closure just means splitting all directions from the very apex of the structure. So if you inject CO2 on a monoclinal depth, it's just looking like this. The CO2 is going to go wherever it wants to go. And it'll find a fault that'll lead up to the surface, or it'll find one of these orphan wells. And it'll just, go back to the atmosphere. Thank you all for having me. I appreciate it.
How y'all doing tonight? Appreciate y'all inviting me down here tonight. They first invited me down here when we attended that bill that I was offering. But first of all, I'd like to give you a backstory how I got here. First thing I want to say is this. You got some find a state reps and senators sitting right there in front of me. Yep. I've been serving down there for going on 5 years. They're top shelf. They're very liberty-minded. They're very fair. And they listen to your voice, and you should be proud of them. I've worked in oil field all my life. But in about 2015, I got mad. The way the state was being run. So I decided to get involved. Told everybody, if they would just let me worship my God, love my family, and run my business, they wouldn't have to put up with anything that I do. And so the first thing I started doing was grassroots organizing, just like y'all are doing here tonight. And this is where it starts. And I'd like to tell you this. You don't live in a democracy. You hear that all the time. You live in a constitutional So you've got to get motivated, you've got to get active, you've got to do what you're doing here tonight. When I first started grassroots organizing, we had something in our area called the Kettle Lake National Heritage Area. We did some research, we studied it, we figured out over a period of time it was going to be harmful to our private property rights. This come out of Washington. You know, when we started discussing this, you know the first thing they told us? It's a done deal, it's over with. Have they told you all that? They're lying, they're scared of it. That's the first thing they tell you. So we organized, and we were fortunate. Our elected officials in Washington listened to us, and within 30 days, a group just like this would kill that federal legislation. That's what it takes. It takes people organizing like y'all. After that was over with, somebody called me up and said, hey, our representative is terminated. You want to run for office? No, I don't. Leave me alone. I don't want to talk about it. And things continued on and on and on. God dealt with my heart. And I decided to step up and run. Stepped up and I ran. And didn't what God's plan was for me. But then COVID came along. I said, I've always had the fire of liberty burning in my belly, and I wasn't going to take what they were dishing out. And let me tell you what a liberty-minded person thinks about what happened during COVID. This is what a liberty-minded person thinks, and that's what we try to do. If you want to get a shot, get a shot. If you don't want to get a shot, don't get a shot. If you want to wear a mask, wear one. If you don't want to wear a mask, don't wear one. If you want to go to church, go to church. If you don't want to go to church, don't go to church. You are more responsible for your life than your loved ones. I guarantee you care more about your community and your people than anybody that's in politics. You deserve that. You're the one that's the most. To me, there's two things about this, and I will say this: I've been in oil and gas business my whole life. The shallow oil and gas business. I'm talking about it's a tough life, right? I loved every minute of it, but it was tough. 6-7 days a week, 10 to 12 hours a day, we worked. Then we come home all night, and I wrote. I've been to Oregon when I was in high school rodeos, all around this area in here. But we were just proud people, hard-working people. When they tell you the oil and gas business supports this, they're lying to you. There are a few, the billionaire companies that want to be multi-billionaire companies, they do support it. But the oil and gas people don't support that. That's the first line. The second thing I'd like to cover with you is Tom DeWeese, private property rights. I've got my phone over here in Facebook Live. I read the quote. It's communism can be summed up in the abolition of private property rights. When they're taking the private property rights away from their individuals, they're heading towards communism. The first time we organized as a grassroots group, we had a gentleman named Tom DeWeese, we flew him in, come speak to us. He kept telling us, you got to compromise, you got to compromise. Oh, I hear that all the time. You got to compromise, you got to compromise. This is what he said. They're your private property rights. Why do you want to compromise? They all belong to you. Why do you want to give them any more money? That's stuff to know with me. Private property rights. Nobody has the right to put anything on your property that you don't want there.
That's right.
And the second thing is the dangers of this. And that we've been through numerous meetings in Bangladesh. And I don't know if there's something else I'll share with you. I don't know if any of y'all get my email updates. I have, during COVID, I started a grassroots organization, Operation Golden Arrow. We have about 60,000 members that sign up to get our email updates. Every week we send out emails. And we have been sending it out by carbon capture. Because the people are, to be honest with you, until it comes to your town, you're just not paying attention. And neither are you behind the eight ball. So it's important. I know they talk about signing up for emails or giving your information. When you leave here today without any of your a long story short, to make a long story short, when natural gas leaks, these are rough numbers. When natural gas leaks, it weighs half as much as the air, so it has a tendency to disperse. It has a smell, artificial smell added to it. It smells like rotten eggs, so you all know that smell, don't you? You know that smell, and you know it's a dangerous smell. It raises your attention. CO2 is odorless. It weighs 1.5 times as much as air. So it wants to stay down close to the ground. And the last time in committee I asked, is any additives going to be put in that so we can smell it like we do natural gas? And the answer was no. They're concerned about chemical reactions with the CO2. So that's your two biggest threats, in my opinion. The other thing is how corrosive this stuff is. The pipe they put in these wells, the estimated cost is somewhere around $1,700 to $1,800 a foot. That's what this pipe costs. That's how corrosive this is when you turn it into carbonic acid, like they were speaking of a while ago. But the pipelines aren't going to, I understand the as of now, they can use existing pipelines. They don't have to use pipelines made out of this new more expensive pipe. So that's a serious concern. But the bottom line is, it's your private property rights. You should be willing to fight for them. And I can guarantee you, even though I'm from North Allen Parish, I live about 2 miles from Texas, 6 miles from Arkansas. Drove all the way down here 3 hours a night to talk to you, and I'm turning right back 3 hours back home when we get done. I just want you to know, as long as you're in this fight, I'll be in this fight with you. I stand beside you.
Good evening, my name is Charles Owen. I'm the state legislator. I represent Vernon and parts of Vernon and Warburg. He didn't tell y'all who he was. It's Danny McCormick. He represents District 1. From against the party's side, I think any legislator that comes down, he's literally at the far northeast side of the state. I wanted to tell you all real quick about a bill that I am bringing this time. I have been invited with Danny and Senator Heather Cloud and Representative Sam Warren and Representative Carrier. We all came in the same time together. We all got elected in 19, so I'm in my 5th year down there. I am bringing a bill this time to try to provide a local opt-out option. Okay? What I want to do, and first of all, I think we have to do it. And I asked the lawyers at the House, do we have to do this? They said yes. I said, why can't the police jury just say no right now? Because that's the way our law is. Look, our law is messed up. It's like a snake in the lawnmower. We have so many weird laws in Louisiana that constrain who we are, they constrain our liberties. I don't know that they were all put in place to mess with us, but there's a lot of things that just mess with us. I wish right now that the police jury in Allen or Vernon or Warburg could say, we're not issuing that permit. But because of the way our law is established, they can't. They can come in and do this. So what my legislation is going to do, it's going to go down 2 options. First one is it's going to give the parish governing authority the right to say yes or no to this. The people of Allen Parish who elect the police jury, they should be able to say yes, we want this business activity, or no, we don't. They can say you don't want liquor here or you don't want gambling here. If they happen to vote a way that the citizens don't want, there is a fail-safe in there where 15% of the registered voters will bring a petition, then you can vote on it. So if your police jury makes you mad, and look, it may be a case that a police jury says no, and the citizens say we want yes. I can't imagine anyone doing that. But this is meant to be as close to a democracy in this moment as we can. Danny's right. We're a constitutional republic. Y'all elect people to make these laws. Trust me, you don't want this job. There's so many things that go on inside of government. And you elect people to go down there and to vote on your behalf and to make decisions on your behalf. And if you don't like what they do, then you run them off. I we had a legislator down there who was bringing a bill, Paul Hollis, and he was going to bring a bill to make it easier to recall, to get the threshold very low. You know what happened? He got crossways with some people who were helping him. He got crossways with people who were saying, we think it needs to be 10% of the voters, it needs to go no, it needs to be 20, and they got into a fight and it fell apart. So I think I'm going to do that next year. But anyway, that's what the bill is. In House Bill 4, I wrote it in November. I've been circulating it. I let the police juries in Vernon and Boulevard read it. No one told me not to. I didn't really hear back from Boulevard. But no one told me not to do it. So I think that's the best thing for us to do. Now, if I were king for a day, if I had 3 more wishes, I would make carbon sequestration an illegal activity.
Amen.
Enhanced oil recovery has been going on a long time here. I'm not a woman. Just as way back when I was a military officer. After I graduated from Williamsville High School, I went to Louisiana Tech and now I live in the Air Force. I've never been in an oil field. It's not my thing. I have no reason to know about carbon sequestration or enhanced oil recovery until these last couple of years when this thing was dropped on us. But enhanced oil recovery is used to get oil out of the ground in these fields that aren't producing well. And so the people that are involved in this, we've got a great process. That's what this is, and that's all we're going to do with these wells. My take on it is that is not the case. If you're doing enhanced oil recovery, you are pulling a product out of the ground that's going to be sold. It's going to go into the market. It's going to provide an economic benefit. It's going to do all sorts of good things. Carbon sequestration is creating a waste site. Yep. This is creating a dump, and it is a dangerous dump. If you have smart people that tell you, you don't know what it's going to do. So that's where I'm going with this. Now, I'll tell you, there's a lot of things that I'm doing, trying to, I would say, shake the battlefield before we get there in April. I sent a letter the other day to the Department of Natural Resources and to the Department of Environmental Quality. In my mind, because we are creating a waste site, that the Department of Environmental Quality needs to manage this. This is not a natural resource. That's right. We are taking something out of the air, and we're creating a toxin, and we're shoving it into pipes, and then we're putting it in the ground. Where is the natural resource? I don't understand it. So Secretary Gray and Secretary Giacomello, I don't pronounce her name right, who was EQ, they both owe me an answer on that. Okay? I'm also trying to get the EPA involved to talk to me about the tools that are out there. Now, my background was in the military. I was at what they call a target planner. We decided, we made recommendations of things that were going to get blown up. We pick targets and bombs, and a subcomponent of that, what we do, because we're a good country, we model things before we go blow them up. We give probabilities of damage, and then if we're going to go blow up something like a chemical refinery or an oil refinery, we have modeling tools that will show us where the plumes are going to go in the air. So the federal government has this technology. I'm going to try to force feed them to come to the table and to either tell us, they can tell us where the plumes are going to go or not. Because right now, everyone's being very ambiguous. It is not good enough for me for them to say, well, yes, there's a risk. No. That is not good enough for me. And I'll tell you the other thing, and I will sit down because I've been here a long time. The thing that drives me on this is because of where I'm from. In Vernon Parish in the late 30s and early 40s, several thousand families got knocks on their door. The United States Army said, we need your land. We need your daddy's 40 acres. We need your 10 acres. We need you. People were having to leave the East Ridge and go to Evans, to go to Slable, all over the parish. Fascism was on the march, and our citizens said, okay, we understand this. We don't like it. And some of those people are still alive. A lot of their children and grandchildren are still alive. In fact, we gather once a year and talk about this. Because we gave for the country. This is not that moment.
That's right.
There is no fascism on the march. This is a lie from the pit of hell.
That's right.
About climate change.
Yeah.
Climate change is an absolute lie. Man-made climate change is a lie. They're trying to take our living, they're trying to take our property, they're putting our families and our lives at risk in perpetuity for this.
Yeah.
So I am sorry that these laws are in place. They've been around since 2009. This didn't happen in 2020. Yes, there was a vote in 2020. I'm going to go ahead and confront this with people listening. There was a vote in 2020 at the end of the legislative session. Every one of us voted for it. We came in and all we were told was, hey, we're going to extend this thing called carbon capture and it's going to help the oil and gas industry. Well, Daddy's in the oil and gas industry. I'm thinking, well, maybe I don't really have that in Allen Parish. Maybe this will help someone in Houma or Lafayette or somewhere. Now, I'm very skeptical of all kinds of things, but it was like, there was no end state to this that was ever briefed to us. I had no idea it was poison. I wish I had that vote back. I've probably taken 5,000 votes. I wish that one would come back and then voted at 95 to 1 as opposed to 96 to nothing. But I'm going to fight this with both hands, with everything I have, because liberty is ours, and we are not going to give it up. Thank you all for having this. Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you very much. These guys right here, we've been working together on this for, well, over a year. And we all, each of us has taken certain bills and following some of them kind of duplicating. I talked to Charles about getting back with his bill, and he thought better that I should go ahead and run my own bill. So I don't understand how in the hell they can permit this stuff being bad like it is. And I talked to Secretary McRae. Nobody can give you an answer on that at all. So, and we keep asking questions, but I filed a bill last week, Thursday, I think, we gonna go get this stuff. We work, you guys. Y'all don't want it, we don't want it. I'm not a scientist, I'm not a smart judge, as Chuck, but I'm gonna do whatever y'all want, period. And so I filed a bill Thursday. We're gonna be able to vote on it. And what else was I was talking about? Anyway, we're going to be able to vote on that, and my bill is going to pass. The second bill I filed last week was on increasing the liability for the companies. We all got together and we each have different bills, and this is one of mine. And the best part of it on the back is like, okay, unless otherwise provided by law, the ownership of a tract of land carries within the ownership of everything that is directly above it or under it. The owner may make works on, above, or below the land as he pleases, and draw all the advantages that accrue from them unless he is restrained by law or by rights of others. And that's the way it should be. You ought to be able to do whatever you do with your land on top and below. So I think we're going to do well. I don't understand why they're going to get permitted. And nobody can answer me that question. It just gives me the red, but I'll tell you. But anyway, we're going to be able to vote on it. I think we'll be able to do fine. And I want to thank these guys for coming down. They're the best. And of course, we've got the best senator here in the state of Louisiana. But so that's all I got.
Thanks. Stay right here, Dwight. Stay right here. I'm Heather Cloud. I'm the senator that represents this area. I represent Allen, Evangeline, and Boyles, some of the St. Landry, and some of Rapides now. I remember DeWitt, I don't know, probably 4.5 years ago, we sat down at the Crawfish Shack. First time I ever heard about carbon capture and sequestration. We sat down with the company and a few elected officials around the table, and they pitched the idea what about everybody else? And I knew at that moment, I had a feeling there was going to come a day where everybody else got in the conversation. And I think that's where we're at right now, not just and it's happening in spots across the nation, it's happening in spots across the state. And I know we're talking about legislation, these are phenomenal people. Like the Lord has really sent some phenomenal people to advocate and work on your behalf. I work with some of the greatest people. We have a great governor, and his pulse is on this situation too, because he's a dear friend of mine, and we've talked about it multiple times. I want to compliment your presentation and the videos. There was some compelling footage here and some very compelling testimony here. And I think listening to it all, it continues to bring me back. Let me stop right there to 2020 when we made that vote. And how little we know. I mean, I've come from a business background, from a construction background, from an educational background, even from a food service background, right? DeWitt comes from an educational background, and we go down to Baton Rouge and we work on your behalf. And the 5,000 votes, and sometimes in one session we'll see 1,500 votes. Like we're making 1,500 votes, and we're doing that sometimes in the last 3 weeks of a session. So things happen really quickly, and this has all happened really quickly, and a lot of us are playing catch up, especially those that have these projects going on in our areas. And unfortunately, I just heard today that there was a project, I'm from Turkey Creek, that there was a project that was discussed in my own area not too long ago, and I had no idea about carbon storage in my own area, so we don't know what other conversations are happening. But at the end of the day, the Exxons and the Occidentals and all these companies, these oil companies, they're in business, right? To make, the bottom line, somebody had an image of $1 up there. Who had that presentation? Somebody had a presentation with $1. And the reason that we're all here is because the federal government changed the game some years back, and they're doing business. I'm not taking up for them, but they're doing business. Because we stopped drilling for oil, we stopped producing oil, these companies did adapt. And it's because our federal government changed the way you get the dollar. You understand what I'm saying? Like, we in Louisiana are filing bills, running bills and filing bills to try to get a rein on the situation. But truly, when I think about the essence of the issue, it's at the source of the issue. Do you know? Does that make sense? And that's where the incentives are. Our taxpayer dollars, that's funding all of this, that the companies are doing business and they're going after the dollar to keep their business afloat. The federal government, if the federal government, there are two ways carbon sequestration is profitable, what they're going after, is injection, storage, and utilization. Some companies are, and correct me if I'm wrong, anybody that knows better than me, because we're still students. You guys are far ahead of us, so correct me where I'm wrong. Utilization, and utilization, how many of you know about advanced oil recovery? Do you know what that actually is? Because I didn't. I'm not too ashamed to say that. I didn't know about it until just months ago. And you know, we're voting, like on your behalf, and I didn't know what advanced oil recovery is. And what they told me, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I want to learn. That's why I'm here tonight, so I can represent you well in Baton Rouge. That's when they inject carbon CO2 into oil wells to increase the amount of oil that comes out. So that's good for a company. You're getting, what do you expect to get when oil comes out? 40%?
It comes out of the ground, if it's breaking the cost of CO2 that you're injecting, then you're making a profit.
So I heard something or using it.
So
And is there anything wrong with that? Using CO2 to push some of the oil up?
I just don't think tax credit ought to be given for. I think the business should try this. You know, if you want to reduce the tax, that's fine. But, usually business
So the company told me that they use CO2 to increase the production in minerals. And they also use CO2 in the production industry, like the smoke that you see, you know, the stages. And so they use CO2 for some things. And there's some companies that want to, you know, their incentives, they want to use it for utilization, not storage. I don't have any problem with that. My concern is with the storage. And so if the federal government would shift the incentives from storage to utilization, I think the conversation here would be maybe a whole lot different.
CO2 down to carbon monoxide, oxygen, both of them are useful.
Yeah, so it should have a button.
So the catalyst will break the CO2 into carbon monoxide. So you get two sulfur products that's going into sequestration.
It's going to be opposite. The only reason that it's wonderful is because it's not a viable solution unless you mandate that they have to do it.
And that's what I'm saying. They're going after it because of the tax credit. And not only, what I'm learning is not only in the United States are they going after the tax credit, it's in other countries, like the European countries, Taiwan, they're all offering tax credits too. Is that correct? And I'm saying this just to educate the public because these are things that I am learning as I prepare to make these votes. Did you know these things?
No, if you want to reduce the taxes like you do for stripper wells, if a well is only making 1 or 2 or 5 barrels of oil per day, you know, we had a reduced taxation on stripper wells because those wells, you would not pull the oil out of the ground without that reduced tax benefit. In terms of just giving the tax credit for CO2, you know, I think the story's still out on that. It's a much smaller market. You know, in there, you had natural CO2 reservoirs, and they were using that CO2 to recover additional oil. It's an obvious use of the CO2. But to take it much further, most of these countries with tax subsidized businesses really end up going out of business because if it's only a tax-driven industry, it's not going to last very long.
And when I look at the very solution to this problem, it's to get the federal government, our Congress, this administration, to revisit what they're doing with their tax dollars.
That's right.
Right? That is how we really solve this problem, so that we, Louisiana, Texas, Alabama, Mississippi, and everybody doesn't keep spinning their wheels. If Congress would go back and the Trump administration would look at the way the business that they're incentivizing, they're incentivizing this business. The federal government is incentivizing carbon sequestration, right? If we get the federal government to look at what they're incentivizing, let's incentivize oil drilling, oil production, right? That's the solution.
Yeah, and that's generally, you know, when you bring a barrel around, it's sort of contribute to the GDP, right? It's creating jobs, it creates a lot of wealth, and that's a good thing. It's been the lifeblood of quite a few jobs. But when you, like Representative Owens just said, when you take a waste product and you put it in the ground, you're taking taxpayer dollars and sticking it in the ground, you're doing just the opposite of contributing to the GDP. That is not really a recipe
But I just want to make it simple. I think this, no matter what, I think the people need to have a voice. Washington should come in and have who they want to come in. The people have to say. That's the real problem. But I want to thank every one of these guys, especially Mr. Campbell and
If y'all like to read my bills, go to legis.la.gov and you can find the file last week's.
I guess I have two.
What's the number of the bill? Yeah.
Okay, we've been here quite a while, and I'm happy to see such a great turnout, even though they're all grandmas and grandpas at ball games. There were a couple of us that had ball games to go to, but this was very much more important. Just to make it start, I have plans to run 2 bills for eminent domain, okay? One is for the disposal of carbon under your property, okay? That's one bill. The second bill is eminent domain for pipelines, okay? So if you don't want the pipeline to come through and you're not wanting to sign that lease, they're going to have to go away, something like that. So that's 2. Those are 2 of my bills, but next month we're going to get together with the Republican caucus and we're going to sit down and try to figure out how many bills that we can actually push forward without duplicating bills. Because this session we can only do 5 bills each, okay? So, I can use all 5 of mine up just like that for carbon. But it's not what the legislature is about. We need to spread them out so we can get the support of other legislators, okay? So, also, I want to make sure that the distance between schools and the disposal wells are more than 500 feet. I mean, they have to be at least a mile away to be safe or safer. You know, the only advantage of the distance is just during the day. You can actually see the plume to where a hospital at night can't, they may not see the plume. So it's going to be for schools and hospitals. We're going to make sure that's in there. Also, the liability, I think Representative DeWitt may already have that. Look, I don't like trial attorneys, okay? These billboard attorneys, but I'm fixing to turn them loose on carbon. So if there's ever an accident, there's not going to be a limit to what they can sue for, okay? We want to make it so unattractive for them to come to Louisiana to do business that they'll go on the rent, okay? I don't care where they go, just so they go somewhere. One more thing, and I'm going to be quiet. Miss Renee, she hit on something real important that I hope every one of you listen to. We are your friends, okay, in the legislature. Every time you open up Facebook, boy, we get hammered, okay? It's all the same 8 or 10 keyboard operators that do it. We are your friend. We go by your information that you provide us. You know how many people called me and told me about carbon? 0. I voted because it was supposed to help oil and gas. Okay? What are we known for? Oil and gas. That's why I support it, just like every other. But you get on Facebook, and depending on which one of these keyboard warriors it is, they say, Shamron voted against it. Voted for it in 2020. They forget to tell you that there was nobody that voted against. Okay? So, just remember, you'll go a lot farther by being supportive of us keyboard warrior.
With that, I'm going to close. Thank y'all for coming. If I can ever be assistant, I'm everywhere you call me. Thank you.
Let's give our families a hand, please. We're going to open the floor for questions for our audience with our families. If your family does not have any answers to questions, we have special guests from Healthy Gulf, who is a national organization that is inviting CO2 on the legal front for violating the EPA. And Mr. Honest Landwright, the floor will be shared with driving down the road. Both with years of experience in system needed. Also, we have Greg Hill from the Jones and Hill Firm, our legal counsel for the CO2 lines, will be available for legal questions. There will be done in an orderly fashion. So, if you have a question, please raise your hand, and the microphone will be given to you.
We've got the first question right over here.
My name is Walter Fontenot. This is my wife, Claire. To our three representatives that are here, Claire and I, in the last year and a half, got involved in trying to get the Social Security Fairness Act passed. And we found out how hard it is to get bills to the floor to get passed or even voted. We found it seems like people who have the power or the committee that lets the bill go to the floor. Has any of y'all's bills that y'all introduced gotten out of committee?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. With the 1,500 votes that were filed, bills that were filed, I think 500 of them made it through. Yeah, a lot of them killed it, most of them are.
You asked, sir, for any of our current bills out of committee yet, or have we ever had it out of committee?
Yes, sir.
Oh, so the legislature is not in session. So we have not had a committee hearing on this. It has not been introduced. Let me say this for the benefit of those that are still here. Those hearings are open to the public. And according to, Ms. Renee said, you need a strategy for that money. This is very important. Please listen. Danny and I were having this discussion the other day about what pressure is appropriate to win. I can promise you rude never works. I can promise you insulting people will never get you a vote. I don't mind being insulted. I love my $1,100 a month job. That doesn't bother me. But there are people around the state who aren't property owners, who have no vested interest in this thing. And it is our job to rationally educate them. It is our job to stare them in the eyes and to explain to them about Allen Parish and Vernon Parish. So when those days come, listen to her. You can email them, you can write them, but polite is what works. I can promise you. If you lose and you want to be ugly on the other side, that's one thing. But like you need votes of legislators from all over this state. So that moment is critical. You're right. Getting it out is not easy. That's when we sit down and we try to dispassionately explain what we're trying to do. Here's what's important. Please report this, my friend and colleague. You get it out. You go to the full House. And then you go through the same process in the Senate. And I wish Senator Cloud had left. Senator Cloud helped me get a bill out of the Senate a couple of years ago that I was told would pass. Bipartisan thing. To be able to convince people rationally. Does that make sense? So nothing has been in the committee yet.
And on the subject of getting bills out of committee, I've read several against carbon sequestration. Most of them been killed in committee. I got one out on the floor, but you know what I liked? I like the public there pushing the buttons. I mean, we've got to have y'all support. We've got to have you there supporting us. Then we will get it out.
We understand that we have influence on y'all, but there's no way we can influence the committee.
There are people that can come into your committee and tell you how to organize and influence. There are people that can do that, and they're. It's kind of like a recipe, I mean, if you've got a recipe, you got to follow that recipe. If you fail, you pick it up and do it again. I run a constitutional carrier for 5 years in Louisiana before we got it passed, and it was a hard fight, but we just come back every day. It failed in committee, then it went to the floor, then it went to the Senate. You got to have a burn your boats personality. You got to be willing to burn your boats. You got to settle for nothing but victory. But you have to have a strategy. Like any conflict, you got to have a strategy that works.
database because we stood up against the shots and our rights being taken away from us, that we couldn't go to church and we couldn't do this. So where is that? Anybody got some answers for that? That's what I want to hear.
Well, one thing to keep aware of is I think the data center is actually in northeast Louisiana, but the direct air capture is in northwest Louisiana in my district. And let me tell you the problem with that. Just think about that. They're going to do a direct air capture in the port in Allen Parish, and they're going to ship it down here to, I think, Vernon Parish and dispose of it. Now, this is a direct air capture. Why wouldn't you set it right there by the well? Why wouldn't you pipe it all the way down through everybody's property? My understanding in the existing pipeline, that people may or may not even know it's coming across their property. My answer to that question is because we passed a law a few years back that gave the Cattle Port the ability to waive all taxes on different entities that come in Cattle Parish. So they're putting the facility in Cattle Port because of tax advantages and putting the whole community at risk of that pipeline when a direct air capture could be set there right by the well. It's all about the money is the answer to that question. And talking about Washington, I know Trump's done a lot with executive orders to kill this stuff, but I don't know if he can kill a lot of this comes from the Inflation Reduction Act, which is a funny word, right? But anyhow, and I think that has to go back through Congress to get undone. I don't know that, but I had asked that question in the last meeting. I said, y'all are spending millions and hundreds of millions of dollars. What happens if this money dries up? Well, they feel confident it's still coming. I wouldn't think they would be doing this if they thought they were going to lose funding. So, that's that. But the kicker is, how do you do this? You organize it and you push back at the federal level and the state level. That's how you do it.
Just real quick, I'll tell you this. Direct your energy at me, come scream at me, come dog cuss me, it's okay. But a representative from Homa or Thibodeau or someone like that who we got to convince, it's not, no, they do care, and they will listen to us. We have 5 years of experience with them. Most of them are friends. Both sides of the aisle, white, black, Democrat, Republican. We are all there from Louisiana, and we have to explain to them how terrible this is. I think we can do it. I think we can do it, and I do not believe this is a done deal. I've had discussions with the governor's office, not him, but his staff told me they will not fight what I'm doing. So that wasn't a promise to sign, but I believe we can convince them, because who can argue what we're talking about tonight? Nobody. Only greedy people who are lying to you.
Hello, this is for Reverend Owen. I've seen you had written a piece in the Hayride about the university and about the Chinese faculty. We traced the IRA, our group traced the IRA funding specifically for what Cassidy was writing about, and we did find it. They created an entire wing in our university, and it is run by a Chinese professor and Chinese students for a pipeline throughout America. And these are not Chinese Americans, these are Chinese nationals. Professor and students in a new arm, a new wing from the IRA budget that Cassidy was writing about. So, how do we feel about Chinese nationals running our carbon capture pipelines?
I'm 100% innocent. You read what I wrote in the Hayride.
Yes.
I am deeply concerned that our public universities in Louisiana, LSU mostly, the rest of them have small numbers of them. There's 109 residents of China, not people who are immigrating here. These are communist people on the faculty at LSU, over 100 of them. And I've dug that up, and I've been complaining about it for a couple of years. I would like you to share that information with me.
It's not LSU.
I don't care.
It's the UL.
I don't care.
Let's
talk with this.
We've already turned this over to our congressman twice. So we would like to know if he shared it with y'all.
I have not. I have spoken to Congressman Higgins about his concerns with it.
No, I'm talking about my congressman, my state congressman.
Oh, you're
He asked me, the second time he asked me for the information. We had already sent it to him. He asked us again for it. So I will share that with you.
I would be glad to see it.
I thought
I'm on
you
education
had
committee.
y'all since you've been written down.
I'm on education committee. Look, I don't want the Chinese doing anything here.
I thought maybe you knew. I thought that's why you were writing that already. So that was my.
That's another affair that I'm wrestling.
Well, it's part of the same problem.
No, I don't.
Good evening. My name is Sherry Coleman, born and bred in Overland, reactive airway disease. Thank you, doctor. All it takes is strong perfume and sick to be gone. So I always want to think about CO2 injection. I noticed they put the map up earlier that a lot of these CO2 injection sites are along the coastline. Not a good place to be. I read a lot. There were 13 earthquakes in the water around Louisiana this past year alone. But all of this stuff is still going on. And in my heart and mind, the reason that all of this has happened is because of a total lack of knowledge. Nobody knew anything about it, and neither was it shared in a timely manner. What is supposed to happen now? I heard the young lady say that it's a done deal. This better not be a done deal. It better not be a done deal. Because not only will you be killing me, the amount of arsenic and lead that we have in the soil in the state of Louisiana is serious business. We're talking about the mental capacity of children simply because there may have been an earthquake on the coastline and the soil and the water just happen to get together and then you purify it. But once lead and arsenic are in your body, they're in there. This cannot be a done deal. You cannot take out all the generations of this state. We're not at the top of the heap, but we don't deserve to be the fertilizer for the rest of the heap.
We agree.
You go to the drawings. So within those systems, we have things called passive system and active system, right? So passive is what they called earlier, maybe $1,800, $2,000 a foot or student.
That's correct.
That will be more of a passive type system, right? They're going to build that downhole piping where, under any circumstance, but nothing can go wrong within reason. You can easily go anywhere. And then a pipeline, you think they're going to pay $1,000 a foot for a pipeline? Wrong. So what they're going to do is they're going to do an existing pipeline or a cheaper quality metal in that pipeline. And they'll put it in place what they call active control. Right? Which would be maybe the going or whoever put the pipeline. So they really put the controls in different areas. That's not what they do. We're going to run a smart pig once a year. And we'll collect data and everything, right? We're going to put pressure transmitters on it so if something goes wrong, we'll stop it. Or we'll have a shutdown valve or actually this goes right? Well, all that's fine. Does your car break down? Does your water boiler break down at all? Or lights go out or power or anything break down at home? All those active controls can and will few times, because when I was doing my risk assessments, I was still being, you're going to get a pass system. You know, I'm going to get you a thinner pipe downstream, because I got a shutdown valve here, and that train center, what I'm saying, I was saving 186 people. Those platforms, about the size of the building, 4-story tall, we're producing 100,000 barrels of oil per day, about 50 million cubic feet of gas a day, and I got a drilling rig on top of each drill at the same time. There is zero room for error. Unfortunately, we didn't have any. We've had some small incidents. I'm just telling you, if they do it, we won't have to. The reason they use CO2 for tertiary infrastructure, what this company called, they already do a water recovery, called water flood. You may have heard of it. Put the water back down there, basically, right? Coming up through the oil and gas, up to the reservoir, doing the pressure, and sweeping the oil out of the rock. And then you recover oil. When they get down to the water recovery, they come into a tertiary recovery. It's usually a CO2 type injection. I believe that's correct. And it sweeps even better. It gets the oil that the water is. Right? So, everybody knows that different gases have different molecules. Some are bigger, some are smaller. That's why in the industry that I work in, we would use the pressure test out piping with either nitrogen or helium. So instead of putting more liquid, it'll hold that gas. It will not, the nitrogen gas molecule is bigger. CO2 is kind of the same way, right? So when you inject it in there, it gets into all the currencies that the water is looking into or sweep it out. It gets in behind each corner. There's something for a reason. Anyway, I wanted to put that out there. Now, I ended up at 7,000 feet roughly from the injection floor out in Berkeley. I got my family land there. I got an acid stroke down there. The Yankees.
Another question?
Real quick, my question is, can I get a rate of hand who's going to vote for the image, the 2 image of Plainfield? Can I put you on the spot like that? Okay. We're all going to vote for it. Y'all going to vote for it? All you guys here are farms. We got y'all back. We got y'all back, okay?
No, another question?
Mine really was like what that lady did. That's already. My concern, I really am across the world but it's going to hit support for it is the new one. I was really excited down hands. But my question is, what's his real stance? Because I'm hearing, I'm telling you, I heard it on the news last week, you know, he was on the news saying that he very much supported CCS and was acknowledging it and making sure it moved forward. So, what do we have to do? I mean, I had, besides more that I guess I should have sent, and you the ones that before this, but I had sent an email out to everybody that was encouraged on this site, including the president, which that's the one thing I don't understand. Why that one email I had sent, White House several times, I've always got a response. This time it keeps bouncing back to what's going on there. That's a big question, a big red flag. Because all the rest of them that I sent out, I got one reply back. They were very nice. It was the petitions to me. I just added my last paragraph. As a mother with children and grandchildren living here in our great state, as a registered nurse who works at Mississippi field, knowing, hello, into Louisiana is definitely not, I'm sorry, definitely Allen Parish is not ready to have gas masks to give to a site of this magnitude. I'm sorry, where is the compassion? I don't understand how, you know, we're talking about all this, but we're talking about lives here. You know, our lives, our animal life, our fishery, everything is Louisiana makes us. But we're souls, we're human beings, and even think that we're in a state that somebody can go from our property that I pay big taxes on and tell me that they can just do whatever they want to do to it. I agree with whoever said this is communism. I mean, it really takes the light off of what can we do for our governor, because I'm hearing this, but where's our governor for this? You know, I hear him saying this, I know y'all are fighting, you know, we all want to fight, but could he, as a signature, cancel anything that y'all vote on as a governor?
You know, and I will say this about Governor Landry. None of us up here can speak for him. And he is by far the most conservative or most liberty-minded governor we've ever had. You know, he was fighting during COVID for our rights when everybody else, most politicians were running in hiding. You know, it's us as a body. It's our responsibility to put a bill on his desk. I've got full faith in Governor Landry that he's going to give this serious consideration. You know, and you know, like we said earlier, I've been in the oil and gas business my whole life. When Chuck called me, I'll take more responsibility than anybody in this room for missing that field in 2020. And I'll tell you why. Because I've been in the oil and gas business my whole life. And these men depend on me to run interference. When Chuck called me and told me I voted, I argued with him. I didn't never voted for this. He said, yeah. I said, no, I didn't. He had to send me the bill and for me to know he voted. It was that far on the radar. And I got to assume that I'm very liberty-minded, grassroots organized, and I was so uneducated on this subject. I cannot believe that, you know, Governor Landry has any more education on this subject than I have. So, you know, like I said, we don't speak for Governor Landry. He's done great things. We think he's going to do great other things. We support him 100%. But I have full faith if we put a bill on his desk, I feel confident that he'll sign it. And that's where the fight's going to be. You know, at the end of the day, all he can do is sign the bill and not sign it. We've got to put it on his desk. So and most of these bills are going through the House. And then if it goes to the Senate's the big lift. And then if it goes to the governor's desk. So it's up to us to put it on his desk and see what happens.
Just one quick thing on that. Governor has said he supports carbon sequestration. He said that. I don't think he's been fully informed of it, but it's one step at a time for us right now. And my first step is to give your police jury the right to say, heck no. Now, I would love in the long term, as I said, to make this an illegal activity in Louisiana, because I think it is a fraud. I write about that consistently. Look, I found out we have a great ally today. The railroad commissioner in Texas is basically the public service commissioner by himself. Their railroad commissioner is fighting this. Texas is sending their filth out to sea. That's what they're going to do. So, and that's a fallback option for us. That if you really want to do this, if we really think we're going to make a difference, and these oil companies must have this money, then send it into the Gulf of Mexico, not into the ground of Allen Parish or Allen Parish.
Most of our oil wells are in the Gulf. So if you start dumping CO2 into the Gulf, what happens then?
I would like it killed all the way around. You have to pick what your battle lines are. I hate it. Look, I hate it. Trees eat carbon.
But even what the politics are in that group, do you think that in general, reps and senators, do you think that the information that we shared here tonight, especially Mr. Pratt, in the list that are involved, do you think that's pretty much commonly known in that room? Or do you think that you haven't had time
To me, I feel like everybody's just now waking up to it, like Senator Stroud said, is that her name? Cotton. You know, I think that it's evident to me that everybody in the citizenry seems to be much more informed than do the elected officials. But I do believe that they will bend to the need of common sense, because everything we're talking about here is just common sense. You're talking about monitoring. I think Charles was talking about the monitoring with a seismic amplitude. You'd have to have very expensive seismic data shot before and after. That's extremely expensive to do. And the things that you see on seismic data there's no guarantee. You know, I think people have understood that. That's why we drill dry holes, right? And so following a CO2, plume around with the seismic amplitude is just, to me, not very practical. And I do think, though, that everybody is sort of waking up. In the last 2 years, things were done, people were told things that were just false. And now it woke me up to the young lady that spoke without a mic. I didn't know what effect I would have. I called my legislators and I got up in arms and before you know it, I was up here speaking to you people. But I think it's the same thing. It's like we all have to have some part and let them know just how much we disagree with what's been done. And I think these gentlemen here are going to do their best to make sure that happens. So we pray. We pray for them all the time, right? We got to pray for these guys. That's one thing that can turn it around, I think.
Yeah, but my question is,
Yeah.
for the politicians, do y'all think that, we got a lot of, we got education a lot tonight. You guys and guys like him. Do you think the legislature is good education?
No, people aren't toned into this because it's not in their yard. It is our job to tone it in. It is your job right now as the group that speaks, multiple groups here, to start finding other allies in the rest of the state and to start getting the word out to other legislators of this time. We can.
How do we do it?
We have time for one more question.
One thing I'm concerned about, and I think Chuck and one of these guys will address it, is that if they go ahead and permit this, and they go ahead and the facilities, we're not getting a dime right now. Not a nickel. And are we addressing that in one of the other bills that we're following?
We want to make sure we do.
Shane Matt, thing, right now. But that's a question.
That's the way they initially sold it to us. They used that comment, say we have done this for 50 years. But they didn't say they're going to take 15,000 acres for a full money.
See, because that some hole on there, they advertise, we inject more CO2 than anybody, but they not inject it all out, they're not storing it. I think they're getting, I think that really should not, it mixed up.
This is how you confuse it. You say,
So I'll get your voice out as much as I can to be able to help you with this matter. I want to thank everybody on an excellent job. Historic carbon in concrete. So they're talking about putting up in the Gulf, but you can also store it in concrete. So my question for the legislators is, can they do this where if they store it in concrete, can we use that concrete to fix the roads and bridges in Louisiana, and thereby helping pay for the roads and bridges on the tax credits? Can we do that? Thank you all very much. I appreciate it.
I don't have a question, but I do have a recommendation. Everyone was given an agenda of form tonight, please look on the bottom. There's a QR code. We would like for you to scan that with your cell phone, with your camera, and then there's a link that will pop up. It has your demographic information and 4 questions. We would like to make sure we can keep people informed about information going forward. Thank you.
She done killed you?
Thanks for coming.
I missed it.